Saving America one entrepreneur at a time, it's the Biz Rap Podcast with your host, Michael Manahan. The show that celebrates small business and entrepreneurs, it's Biz Rap Radio with your host, small businessman, educator, and author, Michael Manahan. And welcome to another edition of Biz Rap Radio. It is your host, Michael Manahan, and thank you so much for joining me today. I've got an absolutely fabulous show lined up for you today. But if you haven't heard about Biz Rap Radio, we are the show all about entrepreneurs and small business. Yes, we're out there championing what drives the U.S. economy. It's entrepreneurs, it's small business people. Now, don't believe what you hear on the news. No, it's not Microsoft and General Motors that drives the economy of the U.S. It's people just like you running small businesses throughout America, creating jobs and supporting the economy. Did you know that most people in the United States actually work for small businesses? And as we pull out of the recession, most new jobs are created by small businesses. But you know something? There's an attack going on in this country. It's an attack on small businesses. The banks don't really want to do business with you. When was the last time you heard of a new business getting a bank loan? I mean, that stuff went out about 50 years ago. Now everybody has to finance their business using their credit cards at 28%. Thanks very much to the banks for that. The government, well, they've got more rules and regulations than you can imagine that you have to comply with. I mean, I read the story a few months ago about the lady who wanted to open up a yogurt shop in Los Angeles. Took her 2 years to get the permits to open a yogurt shop, if you can believe that. So we're here, Biz Rap Radio, trying to help small businesses go, whether it's government red tape, whether it's trying to deal with the banks, whether it's trying to get money for your business, or whether it's just ideas and strategies that you can use as an entrepreneur or as a small business person to put more money in your pocket. And yes, that is what it is all about. I know somehow in this day and age, profits seem to have garnered a dirty word, you know, that everybody's talking about those 1%ers and income equality, but you have an obligation as a business person to make a profit. There's a reason for that profit. With that profit, you take care of yourself, you take care of your family, and you take care of your community. And boy, is that something that I see small businesses do. All of them are involved in the local community. They're supporting homeless centers. They're supporting the local baseball team. They really are doing a lot to help their communities. And when small businesses help out their communities, they're doing it from the heart. Sure, Coca-Cola will sponsor your 10K run, or Gatorade will sponsor your 10K run, but they're not doing it to be charitable. They're doing it because for them that's advertising. But when a small business does something like that, it's really coming from the heart of the owner. And that's what we need to get back to in this country. The heart of small business people making profits, supporting themselves and their family, and less money going into the coffers of the government and those big corporations. Well, let's get on with the show. Enough talking on my part. Absolutely excited like you would not believe. I have a guest on who's it's just amazing, and I'm so honored that he has agreed to be on my show. He is a gentleman known as the grandfather of possibilities. He's a mentor. He's a consultant. He invented, believe it or not, the magnetic strip that is on the back of every one of your credit cards. Yes, we would not be able to swipe our credit cards. I hate that word, by the way. Why did they say swipe credit cards? That sounds like stealing. We would not be able to slide our credit cards and have it read by a machine if it was not for this gentleman. So I'm really, really excited. Ron Klein, welcome very much to Biz Rap Radio.
Well, thank you, Michael. That's quite an introduction. I really appreciate that. And I enjoyed hearing you with your presentation as to what entrepreneurship is all about. I agree with you 100%.
Well, I'm so glad. And you've been an entrepreneur, it looks like, pretty much all of your life.
Well, I failed at retirement 3 times, so that's why I'm an entrepreneur.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I was watching one of your videos on your website, and I see that you're a cyclist, and I got so excited about that because I used to be a runner. And, I did the marathons and all the rest. And one day I got out for a run. I ran literally about 2 miles, and I had to limp back to my car. And so I took up cycling, and I just love it. I think it's great. And so you're a real advocate of cycling, I would think.
Well, yes, I am. And I ride 30 miles every morning. And I started riding for therapy because I have a serious inoperable back condition, and my spine is bone on bone in the lumbar area of my back. So it's inoperable, and I've had a few accidents and problems. So I figured I'm going to try and fix it myself. And about 25 years ago, I got on a racing bike, bent over, and discovered that as I pedaled, it opened up the facet joints where it's bone on bone in my spine, and I was totally pain-free. So I started riding and doing very well, and I became so proficient at it that somebody said, well, why don't you enter triathlons? And I didn't know what a triathlon was, but and I couldn't run and I couldn't swim because of the pain, but I was able to join a relay team. Well, make a long story short, I started winning lots of medals, doing really good, and then ended up going into the Senior Olympics.
Wow.
And there I was just doing time trials. And I did so well in the Senior Olympics that in 2003 I was Athlete of the Year in Sarasota County in Florida. So how's that for riding and therapy?
That's amazing. Now, Ron, do you mind telling the audience how old you are?
Well, fortunately, I'm turning that big number. And when I tell you how old I am, I'm so excited because now I can claim I'm going to be dyslexic and start all over again. I'm going on 80 years old and still going strong.
No way. And you're riding 30 miles a day at 80 years of age?
That's right.
Well,
and quite at a nice speed, too.
If you are not a role model for everybody out there, that's it. I'm pulling out my bike tomorrow morning, and before I come into the office, I'm going to get in.
Well, even on my website, you can see that when I won all the medals, I actually was so excited I held the bike over my head, and that's on my website too. So that's a big smile.
Well, that's great. Now, Ron, just while we speak about websites, let's give your website here so anybody listening can find you and find out more about you. What is your website?
Sure. It's thegrandfatherofpossibilities.com.
Well, that's pretty
easy.
And
I also have another domain name that will take you to the same website. It's a little easier. It's the numeral 4, the number 4, RonKlein.com, and it's RonKlein. I welcome people to come and visit.
Yeah, check if you're listening, check it out. This is just such an amazing man, and we only just got started here. We got a couple of minutes left in this segment, but let's go back, wind the clock back a little bit. I always ask entrepreneurs, or not entrepreneurs so much, but inventors. I had on the show a few months back the gentleman who invented silly string, which is kind of a stuff people spray around at New Year's and Halloween and stuff like that. This is back in the 70s, and I'm always amazed at the process. How do you invent something?
One word: I simplify. And in fact, it's pretty interesting. When I look at something, I really don't claim myself, Michael, as an inventor. I'm more of an innovator. I think an inventor sits in a think tank all day holding his head trying to come up with something new. And I look for something that will generate a benefit. If I see a good idea and I see that it will generate a benefit, then I'm the innovator that does that. So, and we can talk after the break, we can talk about some of the innovations that I came up with that everybody claims is an invention. I always say that you don't sell the idea, you sell the benefit. So as an innovator, I benefit things, and I simplify everything. That's going to be my philosophy and my story that I'll tell you after the break.
Well, that's interesting that you mention that because I do a lot of business consulting, and particularly with small businesses and entrepreneurs, and particularly ones that are trying to raise that growth capital. Because let's face it, today it's pretty tough to get off the ground if you don't, as a new business, if you don't have that capital behind you. And one of the things I preach is, hey, you've got to tell us, and when I say us, I'm talking about the investment community, what problem are you solving? What problem have you identified, and how does your product or service solve that problem? You want to be able to go to where the pain is. How is it that a consumer out there or a business out there is having trouble doing something, and how you're going to be able to fix that problem? So that's kind of the advice. So it's kind of like what you're saying.
Yeah, Michael, my simple philosophy is I don't classify anything as a problem because problems are frustrations. Everything is a challenge. So I turn a problem into a challenge, and I say behind every challenge there's an opportunity or a gift. And I simplify it by saying, what's the given? What are we working with? What's the solution we're looking for? And everything else in between is the journey. That's the minutia. Don't get caught up in the middle. And most people start in the middle instead of starting at the beginning as to what is defined as the issue here, what's the given, and what's the personal and business solution that you're looking for. And that's my approach on solving problems and providing a benefit.
Wow, we're going to talk more about that right after these commercial messages. It's Mike Manahan, Biz Rap Radio. We'll be back in a moment. And welcome back to Biz Rap Radio. It's your host, Michael Manahan, and thanks for sticking with us through the commercial break. If you just joined us, we have on the line with us Ron Klein. Ron Klein is considered the grandfather of possibilities. He's a speaker. He is an educator. He is an inventor. Problem solver. He is the gentleman that developed that magnetic strip that is on the back of every one of your credit cards, and is a very motivating individual at the ripe old age of close to 80 years. He still rides 30 miles every morning on his bicycle, putting the rest of us couch potatoes to absolute shame. Ron, thanks for sticking with us.
Well, thank you. And I'm still working too. Like I say, I failed at retirement 3 times, so I'm working to the end. Everybody told me that if you don't stand still, they throw dirt on you. So I'm keeping them moving.
Well, it's throwing dirt on you. That's one thing. I just don't want you. I don't want anybody putting me in the fireplace.
No, that's correct. I'm not ready for that.
Now, let's talk about some of the other things that you did. You were involved in developing the real estate system that we're so familiar with, we call the MLS, or Multiple Listing Services System, that I guess pretty much the entire real estate industry in the United States uses. How did that come about?
Well, it was interesting. After I developed the credit card strip and the validity checking system, I was feeling so good about myself because my education, my background is engineering and mathematics. However, I really became an entrepreneur because my expertise is communications between the consumer and the merchant and the technical staff. So I put everything in English so everybody was on the same page. So after I developed the magnetic strip on the credit card, I started my own company, and it grew. It was growing rapidly. I developed the credit card in 1966, and by 1967, I started a company, and it grew quite rapidly to 125 employees, and that's when I developed the MLS system for real estate, because I was known as a problem solver, and the National Board of Realtors came to me, and I said I could solve that, and I came up with a system that did it. And then from there, I developed the voice response for the banking industry. And then my biggest thing, and claim to fame at over 25 years, was to automate the New York Stock Exchange. And I'll tell you a little bit about that story later.
Well, so now it seems that most of what you've done is say what I call technology-focused, kind of software, computer systems. Are you a computer guru, or are you a code writer? How is it that everything you've kind of done is in that technology arena?
Well, I'm more, like I say, an innovator. In my days, when I did most of my development in the early years, there was no such thing as software. Everything was done with hardware, transistors and capacitors and resistors. So I understood that very well, and I had the people to carry my ideas and my concepts out. But I'm not a computer guru from the standpoint of a coder or write apps and things like that. However, there's not too much that I don't understand because I've kept up on everything all through the years. And I've just recently developed something for the blind, which is a very good system, and went to people that can write the apps and do the technology. So, and we can talk about how I simplified some of those things, and probably one of the simplest tasks I ever had in my career was the development of the magnetic strip on the back of the credit card. That was the biggest, that had the most effect on society, and it was the easiest challenge I ever had.
Yeah, how did you come up with that? I mean, can you kind of take us through your intellectual process?
Now, was your question about real estate or the credit card?
No, I'm thinking back to the credit card one now.
Okay, well, here it is, and very simple. Years ago, and this was in the early 60s, when people would come in and make a charge purchase, and that's what they called, the piece of the credit card was just a piece of plastic with an embossed number and your name on it. And the credit card companies would provide a long list, it was almost like a book, every month to the merchants of negative account numbers, people that were not paying their credit cards real well. And they came to me and said, this is really slowing things down. What can you do? And I looked at it and said, well, that's easy. I'll put all his negative account numbers in some kind of memory system and give the merchant a little keypad, and he'll make an inquiry. And if the number didn't come up on the memory system, the person was good to go. So that would speed things up. That was the first point of sale device. Then I said, we really have to put some smarts in a little piece of plastic. And right around that time, because I learned something new every day, I became aware of reel-to-reel tape recorders. And I figured, well, that's pretty simple. It's a piece of magnetic tape. They record music or voice on it, and two motors that move the tape at a constant speed. Geez, if I take a piece of that tape and paste it on the back of the credit card and build a little device to record the account number on that piece of tape and make you the motor. You don't want to use the word swipe. You want to use the word of slide it. So you were the motor. Remember, we would push it in slow and pull it out rapidly, and now we don't even do that. We just swipe it. And that's how simple that application was. I don't want to take up any more time, but just think about it. Only because I paid attention.
It sounds like absolute genius when you describe it. I mean, just basically the whole concept of looking at, I can remember those old kind of reel-to-reel tape recorders. I think I had one when I was a kid. And the idea of just looking at that and saying, hey, I could just take a piece of that tape and stick it on the back of that card. It sounds so simple, but your mind must work in a way that my mind doesn't. Is there a gift that comes with being able to do what you do?
Yes, there's 3 words that describe success as an entrepreneur, and I'll explain each one of those words. The first word is smart, the second is daring, and the third is different. You've got to be smart, daring, and different. Smart doesn't mean that you're a PhD from Harvard. Smart means that you pay attention, you listen, you're aware of everything that's going on around you, and you look at everything of interest. In other words, you just don't segregate things out and say, well, I have no interest in that. You pay attention to everything. That's called smart. Daring, I say daring is just another word for education. Because if you don't make mistakes, you don't learn a thing. If you don't try, you don't learn a thing. So that's the whole thing about daring. You've got to get out there and try. If not, you might as well just go push carts on that parking lot. And then the last word is different. And different means you don't sell ideas, you sell benefits. And that's it. Smart, daring, and different. That's my answer.
Well, those are certainly 3 words that any entrepreneur out there listening or small business person can take to the bank. You want to be thinking about what you do as a small business person. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who runs a small franchised shop in Long Beach, California. He earns a good income, but he was telling me that his whole day is filled with the busy work of running his business, and he never kind of gets a chance to put his feet up and think and contemplate where he's going, what's happening with his business. Should he be expanding? Should he be marketing in new areas? What's going to happen in his industry? And he had a revelation the other day that his particular industry he thinks is all of a sudden at risk, and his kind of business could be out of business in 3 or 4 years. What a scary thought. And he's never kind of sat there and thought, what do you do next? So this would be good advice for him. Smart, daring, and different. So if you're an entrepreneur out there, you might want to think about doing that. In case you've just joined us, we are talking to Ron Klein, the grandfather of possibilities. He's an inventor, a mentor, a coach, consultant. You can check out his website at thegrandfatherofpossibilities.com or the number 4, ronklein.com. Check it out. He's an amazing gentleman. Ron, this is just such great stuff. I'm just so enjoying talking to you. You're just so full of ideas. So you're basically saying then if somebody puts their mind to it and really kind of follows these 3 principles, they too could be really coming up with new ideas and building businesses around those ideas.
Absolutely. An example of that is you were just talking about your friend. Your friend is in the minutia in the middle. He's busy running the business and not looking at new ideas or concepts and saying, what's the given here, a problem that I can solve or a challenge, and then what would be my goal or what's the goal of the business? What's the model? And he's caught up in the middle of just operating his business at present. And if he simplifies it, I think he can really have success of moving along. It's extremely important, and that's the thought process that all entrepreneurs really have to practice.
And we don't do enough of it, and I know that from my personal experience in being a professor, running a consulting business, doing a radio show. I really get caught up in so much. But we're going to talk more about that. This is really exciting stuff. Again, I'm on with Ron Klein, the grandfather of possibilities. This is BizRap Radio. I'm your host, Michael Manahan. We've got more ideas, more provocative things to help you become a better business person, and we'll be back right after these messages. And welcome back to BizRap Radio. It's your host, Michael Manahan. If you just joined us, we are talking with Ron Klein. He is the grandfather of possibilities, is a consultant, a mentor, strategic advisor, problem solver. He's the guy that invented that little magnetic strip that goes on the back of your credit card so you can slide your credit card when you do a transaction at the bank. Ron, thanks very much for sticking with us.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So here I've got a question for you. My dad was kind of an interesting guy. He ran a small business and he worked in the lumber industry for many years. But I would hear him say things like this when he'd see some new invention. He'd say, "Oh, I could have thought of that." And one day I said to him, I said, "Dad, you could have, but you never seem to. How is it that some people seem to recognize opportunities and other people they just passes them by?"
Well, I chalk it up to just one main thing here. So many of us do a good job of hearing, and they're very busy thinking about what they're going to say when they hear. But very few of them listen. And if you listen, you learn. And knowledge is power. And when you have knowledge and you're aware of everything that's going on around you, you see opportunity and you say, I think I can handle that. I have some ideas. I can fix that. And again, you don't have to be the sharpest knife in the drawer, because if it's a technical issue, there's plenty of people out there that can help you with the technical issue. It's the art of communicating, and it's the art of saying to someone, this is my concept, this is my idea, this is the model I see. I need help implementing it because I'm not a technical person. So it's a matter of get up off your duff and think, and don't get stuck in the middle. And I got a little interesting story to tell you later about that.
No, I certainly agree with you. But let's hear your story. I'm interested I want to find out how these opportunities came to you, because first of all, somebody asked you about these magnetic, or how to improve processes on credit cards. Somebody, wanted your help with the multi-level, or not multi-level, but multiple listing service, and then of course the New York Stock Exchange wanted your assistance. How did you manage to capture that business?
Well, like with the credit card, that was simple. A major department store came and said, we have a problem, we'd like to speed up the process, and the burden is totally on the merchant. Well, I looked at the problem. I said, what's the given? They had negative account numbers. What's the solution we're looking for? Take the burden off the merchant and speed up the process. So I explained to you before how I came up with that whole process, and I just implemented something. So it was a helpful task, and I was solving a problem which I turned into a challenge. With MLS, right about in 1967, the National Board of Realtors came to me and said, we have somebody that lives at point A and they want to go to point B, from New York to California. When they get to California, wouldn't it be nice if the realtor would know they want a 3-bedroom house and it's got to have a swimming pool and wants to be close to a school and so on and so forth? Well, if somebody would put all of that information as to what you're looking for in a central computer, and then somebody has access to that central computer, that solves a problem. So it's really a simple task. All it is take all the listings from every realtor in the country, put it into one major location, and give them the ability to interrogate that. And it was interesting because years ago, I even gave them the tools, portable terminals and printers and all of those things, and it grew astronomically. But that was how a challenge came to me. When I got to the New York Stock Exchange, which was a very interesting way that I got there, I saw just tremendous opportunity because it was highly antiquated, lots of paper, lots of little marked cents cards and things, and it was just waiting to be automated. And then I developed the bond system. I'll tell you about that later, but I want to give you a little break and then tell you how I got from selling my public company, which grew to 125 people, thinking I was going to retire at age 35, and I figured, wow, what a great age to retire. That lasted about 2 months, and I went back to work. And then where I went from there, and that was interesting because that whole process was just being aware and paying attention, and it developed into an incredible career for me.
Well, but hang on now. We're going back a number of years. You said you sold your public company at 35. So that means you must have been inventing these things when you were in your, particularly the magnetic strip, when you were in your 20s?
Yes. Well, I was in my late 20s, right?
Late 20s. Well,
it was because I paid attention.
But you said that a department store came to you for a solution. Why? How did they find you? How did they know about you? Why did they come to you and not to IBM or Hewlett Packard or one of those, or National Cash Register, or one of those big behemoth organizations that's supposed to know how to do all of this stuff?
Well, we were a small company at the time that I was working with that was taken over by another larger company, and I was the chief engineer, and I've been known, and I was aware of being known as a real great problem solver because I had built the first load and frequency system for the Philadelphia Electric Company, where I controlled all their generators and using digital techniques and analog techniques. So that was very complex, but I simplified each segment, and I was known as this guy really has some great ideas and thoughts. And then that's where this major department store came to my company to say, how can you solve our problem? That's when I left that major company and moved on to starting my own company that grew astronomically. And then it was just one thing after another.
So let me just, because I know a lot of, I've met a lot of frustrated entrepreneurs and small business people over the years, and some of them will make comments like, it doesn't matter how hard you work, it's all about luck, and some people just get lucky, or some people are in the right place at the right time. What's your kind of philosophy on the ability of somebody to come up with a business concept and make it into a business?
Well, when you say being at the right place at the right time, that's a must, because if you're at the right place at the right time, and you recognize opportunity, you're going to be successful. So you're constantly being exposed to the right place at the right time. After I sold the public company, I figured, okay, what am I going to do now? I named the company a very general name because I had no idea as to what I was going to do, and I figured, all right, I'll go out and sell other people's products. I'm really good in the communications area, and until I discover what I want, and I knew I did not want something that was labor-intensified with a lot of employees, but I wanted to make money really moving on my own because I was young. And I figured I'll start selling other people's products until I can really come up with something that really is a great opportunity. And I started calling on some of my old clients that when I had my big company, I worked with these clients. And one day I was calling on a client that was very involved in teleprinters. That was the old Western Union Twix and Telex machines. And it was a press company, a big major press company. And while I was sitting there trying to sell him some electronic equipment, I saw on his desk was a bid sheet from the Western Union Company. And I was reading upside down because I'm a good salesman. And when I was reading that, I said to this guy, Paul, what is this? And he says, we use a lot of teletypes, but we have no need for this anymore. Every week they refurbish old stuff and they refix it and fix it up and put it out on bid. He said, you can have it if you want. I saw that as an opportunity because right around that time, PCs came out and the internet, and people had cloned PCs, not IBMs, but clones, and they needed input-output terminals, and they were using teletypes for that. So I started bidding on these teletypes, and I did phenomenal. I was buying them, taking them home, cleaning them up in my basement, and then selling them to people that were looking for input-output stuff. And I had a great business. Then in 1975, Western Union decided to go into the satellite business and no longer provide Twix and Telex machines. And they put 12,000 machines of the old type up for sale. And I think, wow, what a great idea. I bid pennies on the dollar. I won them all. But I wasn't real smart. Only 4,000 were in a traveling distance of my home. 8,000 were all over the country that I had to take possession in 30 days. So what I did, opportunity, I called the junk man and I said, I got to get rid of these things. I can live with the 4,000. And the junk man discovered that they were very rich in electronics in the bottom of these machines. And they were old, so old, they were used on battleships during the Second World War, and I think the Korean War. And they had these machines that had to be subject to weather conditions. And they were very rich in electronic cards that all made with gold traces, because years ago in the 50s, gold was very conductive, and they figured that was it. Make a long story short, we salvaged all the gold traces, and we made a lot of money when gold went from $35 an ounce to $800 an ounce. And now I had everything for nothing, but now I had 8,000 pieces of junk because they took the electronics out. Called another junk dealer, and right around that time, one of the Japanese car companies was having a real big rust problem in their car, and I discovered that these cabinets were very rich in chromium because they were used out in the ocean, and they took them off my hands. So there's an opportunity, and the story gets better than this, because now I owned 4,000 machines for nothing, and I was refurbishing them. They were very popular, and selling them to the ITTs and the RCAs. The rest of the story is even better than that, Michael.
Wow, that's just amazing. This is great stuff. Look, we're going to have to go to another commercial break here, but can you hang with us for one more segment, Ron?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, this is wonderful. Just such a fabulous person to talk to, Ron Klein. And you can check out Ron's website, forronklein.com. That's the number 4ronklein.com. thegrandfatherofpossibilities.com. It's your host, Mike Manahan, Biz Rap Radio, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to Biz Rap Radio. It's your host, Michael Manahan, and thank you so much for sticking with us. If you just joined us, Biz Rap Radio, of course, we are the show all about small business and entrepreneurs. Now let's continue with our discussion with Ron Klein. Ron Klein, the grandfather of Possibilities.com, the gentleman who invented that little magnetic strip that goes on the back of your credit card, in addition to a whole bunch of other things. And Ron, thanks again for sticking with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Michael.
Not a problem.
Enjoy it.
Now, you were relating some stories to us, and do you want to continue with giving some of your thoughts
Sure.
and ideas? We'd love to hear
Well,
more.
the point I wanted to make is there was a business that wasn't planned to get into the salvaging and the refurbishment of teletypes, and it just came about, and I recognized it. I was able to acquire the inventory practically for nothing, and it put me in business, and it was great. And now I was actually in the business to hire a couple people, refurbish these units, and sell them at a nice price to the giants, the ITTs and the RCAs. But then I got a call one day from the New York Stock Exchange that in the acquisition, I ended up having about 200 or 300 special machines that they used on the trading floor. And they said, you can save us a lot of money. They called Western Union, and Western Union referred them to us because we took over the equipment. And they said, you could save us a lot of money if you come down here and rent the machines to us so we don't have to buy them from AT&T. I went to the exchange real quick, gave them a full payout lease at a great price, and I said, this was the opportunity. Now I want to maintain those machines on the trading floor for as long as we have them in service. And they said, certainly. So I built myself a cash cow. I had a rental business where I hired a man to be at the New York Stock Exchange, and I was just driving back and forth every day on the turnpike, taking back the machines that failed, having them repaired by one of my techs, and then taking back to the exchange. The opportunities that I saw at the exchange were just tremendous. So I hired some more software people. That's when software came into being, and some engineers, and we started doing things that the exchange really needed, and I was doing it rapidly, program trading and so on and so forth. Here's the final of the story. In 1983, I discovered that their bond trading systems was an auction system on the trading floor. And the stock and equity system, of course, traded automatically. And I said to myself, I could automate this. And they said, no, you're crazy. It's been like this for a couple hundred years. And I said, well, if I can automate it, will you give me an exclusive license to be the vendor of corporate bonds? And they said, yeah, sure. I put the whole thing together. It worked great. I announced it on Wall Street, provided it to some of the leading traders. Well, within 90 days, I had almost 100% of the entire bond crowd trading at their desks. And I made windfall profits because I charged them a nice fee for coming on and joining my club. And then I rented them the equipment at 3 times the cost for 25 years. And it provided great transparency. So there it was, the opportunity of reading a bid sheet upside down on one of my clients' desks and him saying, sure, go ahead and bid on this stuff. Paying attention, taking advantage of that opportunity, and look at the evolution as to where it ended up. For 25 and 30 years, I was providing tremendous amount of support and equipment to both New York Stock Exchange, American Stock Exchange, Philadelphia Stock Exchange, the COMEX, and so on and so forth, because once they saw what I did for New York, they just wanted the same thing for everybody else. So look at the opportunity, being able to recognize that, and jump on top of it.
That's an amazing story. But you know what I'm learning from you is I've heard people say you need to be in the right place at the right time. But I think really what you're saying is life is a series of right places and right times. There's always new ones occurring. If you missed one, there's another one just up ahead. And really, what the people who are successful, what they're doing is they're taking advantage of those right places and right times. In other words, they're recognizing the opportunity and taking advantage of it, because it's not a once-in-a-lifetime thing that you have a right place, right time. It's a series of right places and right times, and if you're clued out and your head's in the clouds, you're going to miss it. But if you're going back to what you said previously, if you're aware, if you're paying attention, if you're smart, you'll pick up on some of these. And again, we're not talking about intelligent smart. We're talking a little bit what I kind of call being street smart, knowing what's going on. And that's really what street smart means. It's what's going on the street where somebody else doesn't.
That's what we said earlier: smart, daring, and different. And I described the definition of each one of those terms.
Yeah, well, I was quoting you.
Right.
Look, I'm a quick learner here.
Okay.
When somebody says,
and again, most important is when you see a problem, you turn that into a challenge and say, there's got to be a benefit behind this, because if I solve that challenge, I've helped someone. In other words, I'm not selling an idea, I'm selling the benefit. And that's what I did all along. Mm-hmm. I took what was an existing operation and improving it. When I first got to the exchange, by the end of the day, they traded with so much paper. The paper literally, Michael, was 3 feet high on the floor. Oh. And then they would have people come in just to take that away for salvage. When I left the exchange in the late 90s, The floor was clean, absolutely clean.
Unbelievable. Just, a game changer. You've changed. Hey, you've made a major impact on the way we operate in this world. A personal story, I've mentioned my father. He ran a small business, and he took credit cards, and that was back before you could slide your credit card. You had there was a little machine that sat on the counter, and you put the credit card in the machine, and then a little 3-piece form, and you ran this bar back and forth, ching, 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 like that.
Exactly right.
I can remember after a busy weekend at his store, he would have a pile of those little credit card slips that was, maybe 8 to 10 inches tall, and then they all had to be filed in some boxes and put on the shelf in the back room. And then if somebody had a question about a charge, you had to go back into those files and pull out the exact slip. I mean, it was a terrible a nightmare of paperwork and slips, and then you just eliminated all that. In fact, now some of the credit cards are coming out, the numbers are not even raised on the credit card anymore.
Well, you know what? Do I have one more minute? Because I want to tell you something interesting about the credit cards.
You got one more minute.
Okay. The reason it survived so long, because I invented it in 1966, it doesn't require energy. And if it doesn't require energy, it doesn't radiate. Somebody can't come up behind your back pocket and scan it, or in the woman's purse. In other words, there's no energy on that piece of magnetic tape. All you're doing is reading that piece of magnetic tape in a little thing that mimics a tape recorder. What they've come out with is these new cards with a chip. Well, isn't that wonderful for the entrepreneurs? Because now they put the problem back at the point of sale, because that requires energy. It's sourced by the little reader that reads the chip. And the only reason it still has a magnetic strip on the back is so that you can use it domestically before they switch over. And if you go abroad, that's to read the chip. But they're going to be converting that because they think that it has algorithms and PIN numbers and things that they can get around, but it radiates. And because of that, it can be pilfered, and fraudulent action can take place there. So I just thought I would inject that. If you do get one of those new cards, make sure you buy a sleeve to protect it so it can't be scanned.
Okay, that's excellent advice from Ron Klein, the grandfather of possibilities. Go to the grandfatherofpossibilities.com. Go to the number 4, ronklein.com. Ron, thank you so much for being with us today. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. I really enjoyed it also.
And this is Mike Manahan, your host, BizRap Radio, and that's all we've got for today. Thanks very much for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of BizRap Radio. Use our suggestion box. Communicate with us. Love to hear from you. Again, Mike Manahan, BizRap Radio. Tune in next week.